Welcome to Session Sunday. Hi guys, it's Jack Edwards, and in today's video we're going to be focusing on how to maintain possession. But before we get into this week's video, make sure to leave us a like and subscribe, and if you missed last week's video, click on the link above. Okay, so moving into the first part of this week's session, okay, we're going to be looking at like a rondo, which is going to be focusing on retaining possession and switching play, okay? But before we get into it, let's have a look at how many players we're working with this week and the equipment that we'll be using. So we have 15 players in this session, okay, but we can adapt that for more or less players. Okay, so for this particular drill, we're going to be having 3 teams of 5. So let's say you had 12 players, you can have 3 teams of 4. If you had a number, say 14, you could even have 2 teams of 5 and 1 team of 4. Or you can even adapt it where you do just have 2 teams, okay, and you can just adapt. You could probably split two teams into the 2 areas with the wider players, as we explained, and then 1 team can be defending in the middle and these areas here. Okay, so in terms of equipment, this week the main things we're going to be using, okay, is balls, bibs and cones. Okay, so if you do have flat markers, okay, so the discs, that'd be perfect so we can separate different areas and grids. So in terms of the setup for this part of the session, we're going to have 2 boxes here, okay, so you can decide how big you want them to be yourselves. So it can either be 10 by 10 or 10 by 15 or 15 by 15. That's the maximum you want to go, because with it being a rondo variation, okay, you want it to be quite tight, and we're wanting to limit our touches, okay? And then 5 yards either side, okay, of the rondo, we're going to have a cone here for 2 players to occupy. And then there's going to be, again, a 10 or 15 yard gap in the middle. So basically you're looking at is either 10 yards across here, then 5 yards either side, or 15 yards across with 5 yards either side. And then same for this, it can either be 10, 10, 10, or it could be 15, 15, 10, or it could all be 15 yards, however you want it to be. So with the 3 teams, we're going to have the Blues who are going to be starting with possession. So they're going to have 4 players on the outside, 1 player in the middle, against 2 greens. The greens who aren't going into defend split themselves into the 3 of them, just split up into the middle here. And then the yellows will have 2 players vacating wide areas, okay, because they're going to be the place that we look to switch the play to before they go and do their rondo. So they start with 1 player central, 2 players on the outside. So then these wide players can come straight into these areas here, okay. So what we're looking to do is complete 5 passes, okay. So you can start off with 5, you can maybe try and go to more if you want to in the end. Depends how quickly the players grasp it. So 5 players don't have to go through the middle player, but we want to try and encourage that, because when the ball goes into the middle player, these 2 players come in, okay, and vacate space in these areas. So we played into the middle player, you can play back out, and then we've got more chance of moving the ball around the outside. Okay, then after 5 passes, we're looking then to create the opening to play into one of these wide players. Okay, so we're playing out to these wide players who then open out. Okay, but then the 2 blue wide players coming to take their place. They then look to play to one of their players here, which then means these 2 green players will move out, and then any 2 of the 3 green players going into defend again. Okay, so we're looking for the same thing again, moving that ball quickly. Can we get some 1-touch passes, okay, to get around these players in the middle, okay, to keep that ball moving, okay, and then, like I say, after those 5 passes, we play again to the Blues, okay, they play towards their players there, moving the ball high, so we're retaining that possession by switching play as well. Okay, and then again, we do the same thing again. Whichever team loses possession, so if the Blues lose the ball in here, or the ball goes out, then they will then become the defending team. Same with the yellows and vice versa. So to make it even interesting, you can do a point system. You could do, every time that they get 5 passes and play to the other team, they get a point as well. So the teams can start competing then as well. So good for the younger players, and good if you're trying to make, training, with that competitive side as well, just to give the players something to aim for with the points. And then it can be maybe after 5 passes, then if they want to do an extra 5 passes, it all has to be 1 touch. So then if they then get to 10 passes and they've done 2 touch maximum first 5 and then 5 passes at 1 touch and then played out, then you can get an extra point as well. Okay, so after a while you should look to make it 1 touch, because then obviously we're encouraging our movement, okay, and then we're encouraging our receiving skills, so that we're opening the body out to see where we can pass the ball. Okay, the tempo is really high as well, and there's lots of communication. We will now move into our first animation before moving on to part 2 of this week's session. Now moving into part 2 of this week's session, okay, we're now looking at a drill which is going to be focusing on retaining possession using our attacking principles of height, width and depth. Okay, so for the setup for this part of the session, we're going to have a 40 by 40 grid, okay, but it's going to be 30 by 30 in the middle and then 5 yards either side out here. Okay, so again, we're splitting into 3 teams. So 5 greens, 5 yellows, 5 blues. So all you really need is 2 sets of bibs and then you can have non-bibs. So you're going to have 4 greens on the outside with 1 in the middle. Okay, so you want this player here to be a good link and an extra player to obviously in these central areas for the players to obviously have an overload. So what we're trying to focus for the team is that when they receive the ball from these, from high areas, high and low areas, okay, so it's like the deeper positions and in high positions, we're trying to use that width, okay, to then play around and through the opposition, okay, so let's say the Blues play into here, then what we're looking for is, can we stretch the pitch so that the middle players here can receive the ball, okay, and then can we look to play out to then play forward, so we're playing around to play through, so being patient in possession, maintaining it, and then obviously penetrating by playing through as well. But also, because we've got that overload, it then means that if a player does receive in here and take it towards one of the outside players, you might see that one of the yellows step out, okay, and then we can leave the space to go forward. So we have, obviously, in possession, in a game of football, you need these height, width and depth principles so that when you're playing against a team who's sitting back behind the ball, you've got to stretch it, okay, to then play around them and try and find the openings. And also, again, just in general attack and play, if you're too narrow, it's too difficult to try and score. You're not going to be able to penetrate the opposition because obviously it's easier for them to defend, whereas we're more spread out, there's more chance of us making runs in behind and penetrating the space as well that is around us, rather than all being cramped in one area, which means that it's very unlikely and it's easy to defend against. Okay, so let's say we're working with the Blues, who then will have the greens, so they're looking to manoeuvre the ball, they can use these players. We're focusing on the movement as well, so once players have played, can they maybe move out, so then even outside players can get involved as well, can the players come in and play short. And then obviously with us having this extra overload in here, there's always going to be one person free. So we're looking to use that green player as our link in possession to keep the ball moving, okay? Can the yellows get attracted to these players out wide, which obviously you don't want them to. We can coast that side of the ball too. So then the Blues have got that little vacated space and playing quickly. So again, it's that 1 and 2 touch football, moving the ball quickly as it's hard to defend against. So we're focusing on our movement to receive the ball, our movement to create space, okay, and when we get it, so before we're getting the ball, being aware of what's around us and making quick decisions. So if the yellows win the ball back, so let's say they intercept the pass, just simple, okay, the Blues then become the team out of possession, so the yellows looking to keep the ball, stretching the pitch, okay, so we're getting the ball into these areas, which means that, okay, we can assess our options, okay, we've got our green player who might get marked, but can we get players coming off the side? We can open out, we can use these players, so maintaining that possession, moving the ball high and wide, okay, moving up the pitch. Then what we can do is, after a certain amount of time, you might want to swap the teams over, but if you're trying to focus positionally, you can have your full-backs, okay, in these wide areas here, you can have a centre-back out here, you can have an attack midfielder, a striker in these areas, so it's playing into feet, okay, for the attack midfielder, it's moving across these lines, okay, to receive it in a half space, okay, receiving the ball in between the lines, and then these players in here can be, you know, your wingers coming off the line, you can be, you know, mainly your centre midfielders and players who occupy the centre of the pitch. We will now move into our next animation before moving on to the final part of this week's session. Okay, now moving into the final part of this week's session, we're now moving into a small-sided game, which is focusing on being patient in possession to then penetrate and then move up the pitch. So we're going to be working with end zones, which are focusing obviously on getting the ball into that final third, and then we look to score. So if you have goalkeepers, you can then obviously have the goalkeepers either side. So once we play into that, once we play through, you can then go to score. Or if you wanted to instead, you can obviously put in small-sided goals, however you'd like to do it. So set up for this part of the session. You can tailor this, obviously, again, to your needs, okay? So what we're going to go with, okay, is 2 20-yard boxes in here with just 5 yards in the middle. Okay, so we're going 45 yards of depth in our playing area, 5 yards either side, 55 yards, okay? And then in terms of our width, okay, we're going to go 25 yards centrally, okay, with 5 yards either side, so 35. So 55 by 35. But again, you can increase, decrease depending on numbers, depending on the age group as well. So you can obviously might want to start with it like this, and then you get into the session, you think, okay, it's a little bit too big or it's a little bit too small. Just get in and obviously adapt it. The main thing to do as a coach. So 7v7 plus a floater who's the green. Okay, so the green always stays in the middle, okay, but then once the ball goes to the side, they can support the attack, okay. So the yellows can send in as many defenders as they want in this area. We're not going to tell them to put all 7 in, it's not very realistic, but what they're trying to put in there is 3 or 4 players. So the blues are going to have a player in each wide area, okay, so this is to give us that width, okay. So what they're trying to do is when the ball gets played in, you can set a certain amount of passes. So it can be 3 passes to start with so that the players can obviously get used to the scenarios, get used to maybe being underloaded in this area. So the ball can get played in. You can use the green player as well. So if we get played in, we get movement off the ball. We'll just keep playing the ball wide. When the opportunity comes, looking to play the ball into the green player and then go and attack the opposite side. Then what we're looking for is these 2 wide players support. Okay, so once we've got the ball in here, we're looking to bring it into this area. So the blues, the yellows might put 4 defenders in here, which then means they've only got 3 in here. So obviously for the blues, they might only have 2 players centrally until the green player comes in. But now, okay, they've got an even number centrally to attack, and they've got these wide players. So they're looking to receive the ball or dribble the ball into this ends area here. So it could be that the green player plays out, okay, and they make a dart and run across. And then you could have the other blue player takes a defender away for somebody else to come in, take the ball, and then go in to score. Then what we're looking to do is then they'll look to go and attack the other side. So ball stop the coach, you give them a few seconds for the players to get back in. The yellows might adjust and say, okay, we're going to have 3 in here, and then the blues will go, okay, we'll put 1 more in there, so it's a 3v3. And then obviously in this area now, it's a 4v2, so the blues are going to be underloaded by 2 players in there, so the yellows are thinking, okay, we're going to back ourselves to get the ball back once it's in this area. So for the blues and the floater, it's about being confidence in possession, okay? It's about our movements off the ball, to using these wide players to then drag the yellows across, to then play sharp passes and then penetrate quickly. Okay, so again, it's completing them 3 passes, it might be 5 passes, however you want it to adapt to. So what you're hoping is that the 2 drills that we do previously in the session, okay, because this is an area where they're not getting attacking, the attackers aren't getting the favour in terms of the numbers all the time, that we've got to adjust. And it could be that, when you transition the ball, it's securing that ball and being confident when they've got players around them to then play through and then go and attack. Because not all the time we're going to have these situations where we're going to have more players or more space, or we're going to have more options on the ball. So they're moving the ball around, okay, they get a pass here, okay, they play into the green. Because that's only 2 passes, obviously we're going to keep the ball, but it can be that in the end you might just want it to be as soon as they get it into the green player, they can go and attack. However you feel the drill's going, okay, they get that 3rd pass, okay, and then eventually they're looking to get the ball into the green player, 2 players attack. So now it's a 4v2. So these players here, it's then how can they support? So if the green player takes the ball into this area, okay, where can we then go? Can one of the blue players try and pin one of the defenders, okay, to prevent them moving into space? Can they occupy one? Okay, so taking them either side, which then means that if the ball goes into this wide area here, can the yellow player then, so as if it's like the left back, get enticed to go into out to the full back or the winger, which then means can this green player spin out the other side, and then can we get a run across the defence from the opposite side to then go in and take the ball in. Okay, so it's that movement and it's that recognising the space and recognising that our movement off the ball encourages people to get on the ball as well. So, if the green player does get it here and they drive this side, can this player occupy this defender, keeping them away from here, so we're creating space in the middle. Okay, so we might have players who are confident driving with the ball. Can this player pin a defender? So then when that ball goes in here, they might look to come short, which creates the space. This player can move out, this player's tagged in, so then this player is going to be difficult to move around. We create those blocks in possession to then take the ball in and play. If the yellows win the ball back, they're obviously just going to look to attack the opposite side. So once that ball's played into the middle, it's free. So if the yellows win it back here, they look to play into the opposite side and then go and score, and then basically we transition, and the yellows will come in here and the blues will go on the outside. Okay, so moving that ball quickly, movement on and off the ball, teamwork, communication, encouragement to get on the ball, and encouraging players, to go and make them mistakes. Okay, so if we lose the ball, trying to be positive. Okay, it's fine. Can we look to win it back in these areas as well? When you lose possession, you've always got a chance of winning it back. We will now move into our final animation before concluding this week's session. Thanks for watching this week's video. Don't forget to head over to our website where you can sign up to view all of our exclusive content. And we'll see you next week for another Session Sunday.